This Russian APC decided to pave its own way. Relying on luck, the APC rushes towards the trench, but explodes on mines. This venture cost the Russians another APC. In the tree line, a Russian tank stops. A fatal mistake. After the first hit, it accelerates and charges towards the Ukrainians. The second hit immobilizes it. It immediately catches fire. Take a look at these flames. The Russian tank is destroyed. The negligence of this APC became fatal. Venturing into direct fire from the Ukrainian tank, there was no escape for it. One shot and the target is hit. Impact and explosion. This is how it looks from the tank's perspective. Such precise work deserves a thumbs up. The Russian column of tanks and APCs was spotted by the Ukrainians. They split into groups and attack from several directions at once. The first to come under fire is an APC. Next, the Ukrainians destroy a tank. This APC runs over mines. It turned into a crematorium on tracks. And this is a hit from a Javelin missile. The affected tank moves about 10 meters and stops. The Russians try to flee, but run into mines. Out of the entire column, only this armored personnel carrier manages to survive. It crosses the road and gets stuck. Today, we're going to dive into this madness and try to answer the question, what's wrong with the Russian army? It all starts with the insane attacks of Russian armored groups. The crew of this tank doesn't realize it's walked into a trap. Not only are Ukrainian soldiers to the left of the tank, but there are also surprises laid out on the road ahead. By the way, a Ukrainian soldier missed the tank with an anti-tank guided missile, but the mines saved the day. The second tank, not wanting to meet the same fate as its comrades, starts to reverse. The chances of escaping the battlefield seem slim, but they try anyway. The second Russian tank also explodes on the mines. The attack is a failure. Looks like another armored group. The first tank, equipped with a mine plow, leads the way, and for good reason. It hits the mines and stops. In these frames, Ukrainians finish off a previously halted Russian tank. A powerful explosion. No chance. Take, for example, this Russian tank. Its attempt to hide from the battlefield failed. Here's another good example. The tank was leaving, but the drone struck it and detonated the ammunition. This APC was retreating, but a swarm of Ukrainian kamikaze drones was already following it. The APC maintains mobility and continues moving. The second drone hits it on the side. Things are very bad for the Russians. Heavy smoke, a consequence of a fire inside. The result is the detonation of the ammunition the APC was carrying. Here's how two Russian tanks were hit during retreat. A hit to the engine compartment instantly immobilizes the tank. Thus, Russia loses a scarce T-90. And here's the third hit. The third armored group, with an identical composition, consists of two tanks and two APCs. After the Russians received a harsh response from the Ukrainian armed forces, they abandoned their armored vehicles and fled. Kamikaze drones leave no hope for the Russians to return for their equipment. Take another look at this hit. The APC is engulfed in flames. A kamikaze drone drops explosives on the tank. Now, it's on fire too. A great fireworks display. Target 3. The flame gradually intensifies. Ammunition starts to detonate. It's beautiful. A Russian armored group is under Ukrainian fire, attempting to break through to the city. 2 tanks and 2 APCs. APC explodes. It looks like it was hit by an ATGM. Artillery scores a direct hit on a tank. Take another look at this. Ukrainian soldiers are firing accurately from artillery, forcing the Russians to abandon their assault. The tank releases smoke screens and retreats along with the APC. The attack has failed. A group of paratroopers tried to infiltrate the forest at night. After being hit by a drone, they abandoned the armored personnel carrier. At dawn, the kamikaze drone flew into the inside of the abandoned APC. The armored personnel carrier is completely burned. Now, it's the turn of the tank that the Ukrainians had previously immobilized. The tank is torn into 2 parts. The 2-ton turret is thrown tens of meters high. Here is where it lands. This is all that remains of the meat grinder. Those Russian tanks that survived try to retreat, but the Ukrainians catch up with them. The APC, which was going first, tries to escape. An unsuccessful attempt. The drone is clearly visible at the moment of the attack. This is all that remains of the Russian APC. This story has a continuation. What do you think happened to the airborne troops? The continuation is available to our sponsors. The Russians attempted to carry out dozens of attacks with smaller forces, and here's what resulted. After suffering defeat during the day, the Russians start to attack at night. The tank leading the attack explodes on mines. It continues moving. Another explosion occurs, which the tank does not survive. The APC tries to bypass it and runs over mines as well. The armored group is now trapped. The Ukrainians use javelins, which work excellently at night. The attack ends with fireworks. The next morning, the Russians begin a new attack. 2 APCs packed with paratroopers race across the open terrain. They are detected and try to break through with a fight. Kamikaze drones are directed at them. This is what the operator of a Ukrainian FPV drone sees. Drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Another T-90. It's easy to recognize by its unique turret. It is also destroyed. On the battlefield, many damaged but not destroyed tanks remain. While the Russians have retreated, it's necessary to destroy what they left behind in their fight. Thus, the Ukrainians will now be burning tank after tank, APC after APC, leaving nothing for the Russians. Yet ahead is still half a video with a large amount of destroyed Russian armor. I wonder what these Russians were discussing. The Ukrainians release a birdie with explosives. It hits the armored personnel carrier. The explosion easily tears it apart and scatters pieces of armor. A powerful blast. And how about this beauty? A kamikaze drone strikes an abandoned Russian armored personnel carrier. The damage causes a fire, and then an explosion. Beautiful footage of burning Russian junk. Here's another piece of Russian junk. The drone flies right inside. The fire does its job. When the drone returned, it found this. And who do we have here? This drone perfectly flies into the armored personnel carrier, and then it's the same old story. And here's another Russian tank. The operator perfectly executes the task and destroys the tank. There's another target nearby, also a tank. Watch how beautifully it explodes after the drone's hit. Another example. 2 Russian tanks were stopped by Ukrainian warriors. Ukrainians used kamikaze drones to finish them off completely. A Russian MTLB brought ammunition to the Russian positions. A Ukrainian drone manages to hit the armored personnel carrier before the Russians could unload the ammunition. And this Russian tank kicks off the season by launching its turret into space. After an encounter with a Ukrainian FPV drone, the tank's turret flies dozens of meters into the sky. Not bad. Ukrainian reconnaissance discovered 2 Russian tanks. They are hidden in this forest. The first hit proves fatal for one of the Russian tanks. The tank is torn apart like a tin can. This Russian self-propelled artillery gun was precisely firing at Ukrainian positions and neglected safety. Ukrainians discovered it and sent a kamikaze drone. A perfect hit and a powerful explosion. And that's all that's left of it. The Russians set up a shelter under this tank, but the operators of kamikaze drones are so experienced that they can fly even into the smallest of openings, which is what happens in this case. For our channel sponsors, an uncensored video with unique footage has just been released. You can find the link in the description of this video and in the hint. This kamikaze drone circles around an MTLB abandoned by the Russians. The operator chooses the most favorable angle for the attack. He manages to land the drone right in the open hatch and destroys the Russian junk. In this place, a Russian tank hit mines and was immobilized, and then it awaited a quite obvious fate. Another Russian tank, and the same exact fate. Another one? Maybe it's time for us to create a ranking of the most beautiful destruction of Russian tanks by Ukrainian kamikaze drones. The legendary Bukhanka and its adventures in Ukraine. Another one. It's so symbolic that it's standing near an Orthodox cross. And that's all. Powerful. These Russians thought that the night would help them hide from Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians modify kamikaze drones, installing night vision cameras in them. Take a look at how clearly the Russian APC is visible at night. The second hit. Excellent work. This Russian tank, after enduring 4 bombs to the engine compartment, is headed for the scrapyard. This Russian tank drives over mines and becomes an easy target for the Javelin anti-tank missile. A precise hit. The missile penetrates inside and ignites the propellants. The tank, utterly destroyed. This tank joined the Russian army in 2022. But today, Ukrainians put an end to its tour on their lands. But these are not the only targets that Ukrainians have hit. 2 kamikaze drones destroyed this Strela 10 air defense system. And this is how HIMARS rockets struck the Grad MLRS. The second target was camouflaged, but that didn't hinder its detection and destruction. For the third target, Ukrainians waited for the right moment and then delivered a devastating blow with a kamikaze drone. And here's the fourth Grad. The fifth target. Another strike by HIMARS. The Grad is destroyed. And that's not all. another MLRS. And take a look at the fire after being hit. Another excellent fireworks display. This series concludes with this strike. Some very effective work. How about this visit by a kamikaze drone to an enemy bunker? I don't know what was stored there, but it burned and detonated for a long time. A beautiful spectacle. The Russian radar Yastreb with an astonishing cost of $250 million. Ukrainians didn't hesitate to use HIMARS missiles to destroy such a rare and important target. From this video, it becomes clear just how destructive FPV drones can be. After the second hit, a part of the building simply crumbled. And this happened even though the drone exploded inside, not upon impact with a wall. Now, the Bradley has lived up to its nickname, Tank Killer. In these next frames, a modern Russian T-90M tank turns into a sieve. The American combat monster once again confirmed its effectiveness. The M242 Bushmaster cannon is capable of penetrating up to 40 millimeters of steel armor. The fatal mistake of this Russian tank is its position relative to the Bradley. Incendiary and armor-piercing rounds damaged the tank's systems. The crew panicked, released smoke screens, and tried to retreat. But the machine already had its critical damage. This is what a Russian tank looks like after an encounter with Brad. Bradley came to stop the Russian infantry, which is crossing the field to storm Ukrainian positions. Even if the Russians reach another planting, it changes nothing. The cannon cuts down trees like thin branches. They offer no cover. This is an incident near Avdiivka. Ukrainian assault troops called for reinforcements. The Bradley IFV easily suppresses the Russian advance. And even if the Russians manage to occupy a building, there's no sense in hiding in it. Brad's cannon will riddle the building's walls. If an enemy tank or armored personnel carrier is at a great distance from Bradley, the Ukrainians use anti-tank missiles, with which the armored personnel carrier is armed. Take a look at this real example from Ukraine. Bradley is often used in offensive operations, but due to their scarcity in the Ukrainian army, we don't see many videos of their use. Where the use of Workhorse is impossible, and this armored personnel carrier is far from a panacea, Ukrainians use many other systems and weapons. A Russian column of tanks and BMPs advancing to assault Ukrainian positions. There is a hit. Russians fall under Ukrainian fire. Artillery does not spare the advancing armored vehicles. The drone's thermal imager clearly shows the explosions of artillery shells and cluster munitions. The convoy is stopping. A fatal mistake. Artillery destroys car after car. Can the invaders escape? The answer is no. The tank is blown to pieces. The armored personnel carriers start to fall back. The Russians abandon their comrades. This is not the end of their adventure. The entire convoy is destroyed. What's this? Another attempt to break through the Ukrainians' defenses? The tank hits the mines and explodes. What a beautiful fireworks display. And this footage shows a whole dump of destroyed Russian vehicles. One APC with Russian paratroopers trying to push the second, and both explode on mines. You think that's going to stop the Russians? They keep driving forward and keep getting blown up by mines. This looks tougher than the Russians' failure in Ugledar. Another failure. The AFV miraculously manages to escape and is not destroyed. The fate of the tank was much sadder. It hit a mine and burst into flames. And this is all that's left of it. The tank you saw at the beginning didn't stop and moved on. That's the fate that awaited him. No backstory. The video immediately starts with the most interesting part. pillars of smoke above the Russian tanks that have just exploded. An AFV attempts to bypass a tank from the right and hits the mines. Its fate is repeated by the armored personnel carrier that followed it. The Ukrainians, with accurate artillery strikes, hit the tanks, which stop for a moment. The Russians realize they have failed the assault when they lose their last tank. The infantry are finished off by the FPV drones. A tank explodes on a minefield. The camera zooms out, and we see another Russian tank standing 100 meters away from these geniuses. Idiots! What did you expect? Another assault. A Russian tank comes close to the Ukrainians and shoots at them. A kamikaze drone stings the tank in the engine compartment. He can't get away. Another tank comes to the rescue, and the shooting continues. The drone catches up with this target as well. Another meat pen near Avdiivka. After being hit by a kamikaze drone, a Russian tank is engulfed in flames, but continues to move. It is a T-80. It was riding in the vanguard of the advancing Russian column. A fatal mistake is the decision to pull off the road. The crew went straight to hell. Look at these heaps of destroyed Russian tanks. Over 24 in one place. Now let's move on to another front. A drone captures the burning tank. Its turret lies nearby. These are the first minutes after repelling the Russian attack. 100 meters from them is another graveyard of Russian armored vehicles. Another story. A Russian tank ventured out at night for an assault. After releasing several grenades, it's hit by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone, and the Russians abandon the tank. The drone tosses a grenade into the open hatch of the tank. The grenade fulfills its mission, and flames erupt from the tank's hatches. This fireworks display lights up everything within a radius of several hundred meters. The operator of this drone is a real ace. The hatch of the Russian tank was open less than half. Take another look at this throw. The tank catches fire. Take a look at this video. Is this not sheer madness? Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and soldiers are seemingly on a suicide mission against the Ukrainian defense. Here's the surprise I was talking about. The village is guarded by a Bradley APC. The Russian infantry cannot react in time. The following footage is hidden due to YouTube's rules. To view the uncensored version, consider sponsoring. The link is in the description. Another group of soldiers rushes to assist. Are the Russians running out of tanks? This attack used only APCs. The first target is hit. While these Russians were thinking about what to do next, another drone came in. And here's the strike on the third APC. 3 drones at once. Another APC. Beautiful. And the final target. This one got the farthest, but it didn't save it from destruction. Excellent work. Facing such fierce resistance, the Russians decide to hide their APC in a garage. 3 kamikaze drones attack the target. The APC was burned. If you look closely, you can see its turret. The northern region. APCs fall into a trap. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone first blows up one. The second target. This APC thought it would find protection in a strip of forest. The APC is burned. And this is a strike on Russian logistical support, a truck carrying supplies. The Ukrainians sent a second drone. After meeting the truck, it flared up. Fire destroyed the entire vehicle. The Russians stopped to fix their truck. Ukrainians took advantage of the pause and delivered a devastating strike. Ukrainian drones come to spook the enemy. The first target is TM-62 anti-tank mines. What a powerful explosion! And these are fuel cans and Russian troop supplies. A bad combination. The fuel helped to destroy the Russian supplies. Nearby, Ukrainians found ammunition stores. And this is a fiery hello to Russians in a dugout. Nothing motivates leaving a position like flames blazing above a soldier's head. Meanwhile, drones keep the Russians on their toes. Each grenade takes out a tank or an APC. A drone drops a grenade into a recently abandoned Russian tank. An explosion and gunpowder ignite. It's a precursor to a detonation. And there it is. -1 Russian tank. Now it's the turn of this Soviet junk, a T-62 tank from 1967. This is the kind of scrap the Russians are pulling to the front. Now it's the APC's turn. One grenade and $400,000 turns into scrap metal. A drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Target 3. The flame gradually intensifies. Ammunition starts to detonate. It's beautiful. Here are 2 Russian tanks from one of the failed attacks I showed at the beginning. The Ukrainians target a T-90 tank. This video shows the perfect performance of a 155mm SMART projectile. Pay attention to the accuracy. You can clearly see the trajectory of the projectile in these shots. For example, this is the defeat of a Russian tank by a Javelin missile. There was no detonation. Apparently, it was without ammunition. Abandoned Russian equipment must be destroyed. Kamikaze drones are excellent at this task. Look how this drone neatly flies inside the AFV. Nice work. Naturally, it was not without epic explosions. This is how beautifully the Russian AFV turned into scrap metal. Also, this Russian tank. Nice bang. Another tank of militants. A Ukrainian soldier videotapes the detonation of the tank. Near Sivur. The Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The Russians begin the attack. The tank goes first, followed by the BMP. The armored personnel carrier continuously fires at them. At some point, the armored personnel carrier turns into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. What weapon do you think is capable of this? At first, I thought it was a Javelin or anti-tank mines, but no, it was a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Wow, what a powerful explosion! And here's what happened to the Russian tank that was leading. First, the Ukrainians immobilized it, then directed a kamikaze drone at it and burned it. It's no secret that Ukrainians have managed to secure positions on the left bank of Kherson. It was these positions that Russian tanks aimed to storm. The Ukrainians don't have heavy machinery here, but they do have kamikaze drones. A drone strikes the tank's turret, and not even an armored shield can handle that. The shaped charge reaches the ammunition, causing a massive detonation. Another thwarted attack of Russian tanks. The kamikaze drone pursues the target and hits the tank in the most vulnerable part of the turret. This part of the Russian tank stores some of the ammunition. That's why they often explode after being hit by drones. The turret was thrown several meters from the tank. Excellent work. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone enters the Russian tank with precision. After a few seconds of agonizing wait, an explosion occurs. It seems the Ukrainians have started using self-destructing systems for drones in such cases. Smoke, fire, and a spectacular explosion. This video is yet another good example. The Russians should have long considered the storage of ammunition in the tank turret. Look at the force with which the turret is thrown up. At that moment, incredible pressure is created inside the tank. After the failed assault, the Russians abandoned their tank. Ukrainians use FPV drones to destroy it. One of the hits proves fatal for the Russian tank. Kamikaze drones can reach Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry in the most inaccessible places or several kilometers from the front line. In this video, the Russians are preparing fortification structures, and engineering equipment is at work. The drone dives into an excavator, and an explosion occurs. The fuel ignites brilliantly. The job is done perfectly. Or this operation to destroy a BM-21 Grad in the rear. Special forces identify the target, launched a drone, and directed it to the Russian rocket artillery. The Russians tried to change their location, but they couldn't escape pursuit. The existence of this BM-21 Grad is terminated. Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups set out to storm. Dozens of Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian Armed Forces strike drones are already over the battlefield and begin bombing. Continue watching via the link in the description. But let's return to armored personnel carriers and Russian tanks. More footage of the magical transformation of a Russian tank into a pile of scrap metal. The Avdiivka region. A Russian T-90M tank assaults Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians deploy artillery to hinder this. As things heat up, the tank starts to retreat. At that moment, it's caught by a kamikaze drone. The modern Russian tank is destroyed. And here's a cargo truck and an armored car, Tiger. They both become easy prey for kamikaze drones. A Russian cargo truck brought ammunition to the positions, and the Ukrainians immediately destroyed it. What a pity. Here he is, the proper Russian. A Russian soldier, realizing he's being pursued by a Ukrainian drone, throws away his weapon. He pleads with the drone operator to spare his life. The Ukrainians show mercy. In the video for sponsors, there are dozens of examples of Russians who decided not to surrender. Link in the description and in the hint. Another video for sponsors will be released midweek, so try not to miss it. What could be more beautiful than a video of finishing off a Russian tank? A precise hit in the open hatch, fiery pillars from the burning powder. The Russian tank is destroyed. Another Russian tank. The drone again hits the target precisely. This piece of Russian junk is also destroyed. The Russians are moving the 2S-19 Masta-S self-propelled howitzer into the forest to hide it from Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. The Ukrainians, however, see all of this. When the howitzer is securely hidden, the Ukrainians launch a HIMARS missile at it. The target is eliminated. These are the frames of the work of a Russian UAV team. A Ukrainian drone tracked a Russian reconnaissance drone and followed it to the command post. Then, the HIMARS took over. The OSA anti-aircraft missile system is moving towards the forest to hide from the Ukrainians. As you might have guessed, the Russians didn't succeed. The Russian army's attack, meant to bring strategic success, did not go as planned. Russian tanks were blowing up, burning, and exploding again. Let's take a closer look. Tanks, APCs, and airborne troops, all ready for battle, split into small groups. The Ukrainians are using cluster bombs. An ATGM hits a Russian APC. A tank deploys troops in an open field. Now, this APC is nothing more than a meat grinder. The second group is just hundreds of meters from Ukrainian positions. They were met with a surprise left overnight. Pay attention to this synchronization. And these are the daredevils who went on solo attacks. Pure madness. The third group consists of APCs and the madmen inside of them. A precise ATGM hit stops the Russian armored vehicle. A tank and 3 APCs. The Ukrainians are simply picking off tanks with javelins. Russian tanks are engulfed in flames. The attack goes on. APCs rush to take cover. It almost made it. But then, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone catches up with the APC. Now, check out this video. This column was just decimated. Ukrainians strike with cluster bombs to destroy the enemy's manpower. It's rather effective. This APC made an unforgivable mistake. From just 10 to 20 meters away, Ukrainians destroy it with an RPG shot. Such bravery deserves a like. And here's an ATGM Stugna P missile nearly hitting a Russian APC. The Russians try to dig in at one of the settlements in the Avdiivka region. A dozen soldiers disembark on the village's outskirts. An unpleasant surprise awaits them on the other side of the village. As the soldiers leave the APC, it drives away. Notice this moment. A kamikaze drone flies over the APC. The drone continues to tail the Russian armored vehicle. The operator waits for the right moment to deliver a crushing blow. The APC is immobilized. Another Ukrainian drone strikes. The APC is destroyed. One hit was enough to start a fire. The drone returns and discovers the debris that used to be this tub. Another hero, a tank nicknamed Kuzbas. The Russians tried to protect it from all sides. And maybe it could have withstood 1 or 2 more hits from a kamikaze drone, but it couldn't save it from a grenade. The fire did its job. Kuzbas burned to ashes. In this video, Ukrainian strike drones destroy what attacked the Ukrainians during the day. First, they burned a tank. And then a group of 3 units, a tank and 2 APCs. A perfect bonfire. Another tank. Some of the ammunition detonated, but it wasn't enough to tear the tank apart. This is what it all looks like the next day. This is the same place we saw in the previous video, where the drone was finishing off the Russian tanks. Yep, sometimes all that remains of a tank is a metal husk like this. Or as these 2 APCs changed color due to the high temperature of the fire. Everything inside incinerated. And here are the tanks from the beginning of the video. Let's return to the destruction of equipment. I've got more to show. The drone dives into its target. The APC is instantly engulfed in flames. In 30 minutes, the Russian APC was completely burned out. That's simply the amount of time it took the Ukrainians to replace the battery and return. This is a Russian tank. And this is the same tank through the eyes of a kamikaze drone. A perfect hit. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone inspected the Russian tracked crematorium. Or take a look at this video. 5 kamikaze drones attack a Russian tank. The 5th hit becomes fatal for the Russian armor. A crater is formed in the tank's location. Can you imagine the power of that explosion? I think that after such a strike, this tank is not combat ready. As in this case. And here's another T-90, which couldn't cross a puddle and got stuck in the mud. And this is all on one section of the front. Can you imagine how many resources Russia is burning in this war? The enemy is very strong. Yes, these are tracked crematoriums, and the Russian soldiers taking part in this, lunatics. Here's the perfect example. The incendiary mixture falls on the netting protecting the tank from grenades and bombs. The contents gradually drip onto the tank, and the flames spread to the hull. Let's move now to another section of the front where constant fighting is taking place. These 2 APCs were stopped by mines. After one of them explodes, another explosion occurs. Pay attention to this exact moment here. An armor plate falls on a mine, hits it, and another explosion happens. This APC was carrying ammunition to Russian soldiers at their positions. Another pair of APCs. The drone first approaches from the left side, but the hit doesn't yield the desired result. Then, the Ukrainians send a second drone. This hit becomes fatal. Both APCs are destroyed. The Ukrainians thwarted the Russians' attempt to evacuate their damaged tank. The strike drone returns with explosives to prevent such attempts in the future. The mission was completed successfully. Ukrainians destroyed the Russian army not only with drones, but also with artillery. It all begins with tracking the enemy. This time, the Ukrainians discovered a control point with a Zala reconnaissance drone. The Ukrainians followed the Russians. When a vehicle with equipment arrives at the command post, the Ukrainians prepare HIMARS for a strike. One missile destroys the command post, the control point, and the equipment of the Russian army. And this is an operation to destroy a launch site for Russian kamikaze drones, Lancet. The video captures the moment one of the drones was launched. Now, the task for the Ukrainians is to track where the launch site will move, find the drone warehouse, and strike all of it using HIMARS. The Russians drove the launch site into the forest. In this video, they pick up a reconnaissance drone. The launch site is used not only for launching kamikaze drones, but also for launching any drones from a guide. A HIMARS missile perfectly hits the target. A powerful explosion occurs, not typical for a missile. The kamikaze drones loaded into a truck detonated. During reconnaissance, SOF discovers an enemy drone. The Russians arrive for it on a mobile launch site. They dismantle the drone and load it onto a vehicle. The drone continued observation and transmitted coordinates to the HIMARS until when the Russians stopped. The target is destroyed. Ukrainians discovered the combat vehicle 9A35 and the Strela 10 SAM system. Coordinates were transmitted to HIMARS, and a precise strike was delivered on the enemy's SAM system. The Russians on the combat vehicle immediately leave their positions, abandoning the damaged SAM system. The Ukrainians launch a second missile and destroy the target, the beautiful detonation of a BMP after hitting mines. Here's even a second angle. Aerial reconnaissance detects a Russian column. The coordinates are immediately transmitted to the command center, and preparations for defense begin. The column is within range of kamikaze drones and artillery. The Ukrainians begin opening fire. Just as the Russian tank crosses the landing, a kamikaze drone crashes into it. It punctures the external fuel tanks. The tank stops and becomes an easy target for Ukrainian artillery. But the Russians don't give up and run into a minefield. They lose another tank. Ukrainian precision artillery fires on the stopped target. Realizing that things are not going well, the Russians decide to retreat, but even here they fail. In this attack, the Russians lose 5 armored fighting vehicles and 2 tanks. An abandoned T-72. The Ukrainians hit the open hatch with an accurate drop. The tank is destroyed. Nearby stands a hit AFV. An accurate hit in the open hatch. The occupant's equipment is destroyed. The Russian tank was stopped by a mine. The Ukrainian cameraman, taking advantage of the moment, starts dropping grenades on the Russian trough. One of the grenades ricochets into the open hatch. The powders ignite, and a beautiful fireworks display begins. A Russian MTLB. Note the crates with ammunition on it. Naturally, one grenade will turn the armored personnel carrier into a pile of scrap metal. The 128th Brigade helped this BMP decompose into molecules. The Ukrainians actively used ATGMs, including the FGM-148 Javelin. It's about to be bada boom! A kamikaze drone helped a Russian T-90 split it into molecules. A Russian tank. The inscription Zov can be seen on the turret. A kamikaze drone successfully hits the target. A Russian BMP-2. The propellants heat up, and a powerful explosion occurs. This Russian junk is disposed of. The Russian T-90M tank failed in its attempt to cross the swampy terrain. After the first hit, it manages to reach solid ground, but the tank is already disabled. A drone's second hit. And a third. A modern Russian tank in flames. The story of this APC ended rather quickly. While the Russians were occupied with something else, Ukrainian kamikaze drones took turns delivering devastating blows. The APC burns to the ground. A similar situation befell this Russian tank. One drone was enough to set it on fire. And here are some more beautiful shots of burning Russian junk. And this T-80 was instantly reduced to molecules after encountering a drone. What idiot allowed this foolishness? Let me explain what happened here. The APC brought TM-62 anti-tank mines and unloaded them nearby. The fatal mistake was the delay. They should have retreated immediately. From the explosion, the APC did a sideways somersault. Here's another moment. Ukrainians were sure that Russian infantry was hiding here and made a precise strike on this building. And here, the Russians knew what was waiting for them, so they tried to hide. But they underestimated the skill of the FPV operator, who aimed the drone right at them. Take another look at how spectacular that was. After the occupants broke through the first line of defense, the AFU fielded an experienced 47 Mechanized Brigade, which was equipped with Western weapons and was able to stop the enemy. The situation in Avdiivka was not bad for Ukraine. They controlled the flanks, height, and presence of troops in the territory of Koch, and the chemical plant made life 10 times more difficult for the enemy. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. One more episode. One of the Russian armored personnel carriers is already engulfed in flames. The second one pulls off the road and stops? For what? The third vehicle starts moving, and at that moment, the Ukrainians hit the target exactly. Excellent work by the artillery. Novodonetsk, the Donetsk region. A Russian column moves towards Ukrainian positions. One of the tanks explodes. What do you think destroyed it? You'd be surprised. A Ukrainian tank drove alone against the column and hit the Russian enemy with an apt shot. The Ukrainians don't stop and continue to deliver blow after blow. At some point, the tank casts a thermal curtain and starts backing up. Apparently, the Russians tried to aim an ATGM at it. The Russians lose another tank. Hopefully, we'll see more of this story later. Another unsuccessful assault by the Russian army. Even after the BMP is hit, the tank continues to move forward. This is his last mistake. The assault has failed. The armored personnel carrier and the tank are destroyed. And this is already a jeweled hit from Ukrainian artillery. This Russian tank paid dearly for stopping. A precise hit from 155mm ammunition turns the tank into a piece of metal. Let's start with 2 episodes of failed assaults. 3 Russian tanks decided to attack the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. The first and the second tank are hit by the Ukrainians using ATGMs, and this Russian tank can't escape death. Fatality! Now, it's the turn of the Russian AFVs. It's a strange tactic to stand in the middle of a field and shoot at the enemy. What I thought was gonna happen is exactly what happens. One of the armored personnel carriers gets hit by a rocket. It is only now that the Russians start to move, but it's too late. A second missile lands from the sky, a Javelin. The assault has failed. The Russian tank is in a hurry to get somewhere, and this hurry plays a cruel joke on it. A mine barrier stops the tank. Now, the AFV rushes in to rescue the tank crew. The Ukrainians manage to hit it too. The Russians continue their movement, driving off into a field and getting blown up by mines. A meat pot. There is no other way to call this Russian tank. After the drone crashes into it, a fire starts, which quickly engulfs the entire armored vehicle. And here's the result. The Kharkiv region. A suicidal attack of Russian tanks. The first tank, with a minesweeper, falls victim to an ATGM. It is stopped in its tracks. Ukrainian artillery begins to work the stalled column. 2 Russian armored personnel carriers are engulfed in flames. An immobilized tank stands nearby. The assault has failed. 2 armored personnel carriers. The drone flies past the first target and hits the second with a precise hit. With only 1 drone, the Ukrainians make the right choice and hit an armored personnel carrier with a combat module. Avdiivka. The Russian tanks are storming the industrial zone. A swarm of AFU kamikaze drones must prevent this. Blow by blow, the Ukrainians ruthlessly attack the enemy. Both tanks are destroyed. Russian-style demining. It turned out to be quite effective. A Russian tank hits the first, second, third mine, and imagine that it's still able to continue moving. Although the explosions look quite impressive. The tank passes through a wooded area, enters a field, and begins to clear anti-personnel mines. Once again, it hits an anti-tank mine. This was enough for the tank to catch fire, and the crew decided to abandon it. A good example for other Russian tankers to destroy armored vehicles. Some more precise work of the Ukrainian operator. The drone starts dropping grenade after grenade on the abandoned tank. The Russian armor succumbs to the onslaught. The tank catches fire and explodes. Pieces of scrap metal are all that's left of it. Minus a modern tank with modern defense, soldiers of the 11th Brigade of the NGU destroyed the newest Russian T-90 Proryv tank in Kherson region. The aerial reconnaissance team delivered a precise fire attack on the enemy tank, after which the ammunition detonated and the explosion tore off the turret. A beautiful fire show from a Russian BMD. The turret is torn off and thrown up to dozens of meters. How rare it is to see videos like this. A Leopard tank clashed in a duel with two Russian tanks. The accuracy of the German tank allowed him to hit the Russian tank at a distance of 1.5 kilometers. After the defeat, the Russians begin to retreat. Run along, little doggies. On the first day of the siege, the invaders took advantage of the position of the sun that shone in the eyes of the AFU and began to advance. These were the moments when the orcs were just approaching the city. The Russians attacked in waves. In each of these attacks, first went the tanks with infantry, then APCs with infantry. The Russian plan in such an attack was to break through with a few armored vehicles closer to the AFU positions and drop the infantry into the trenches. In most cases, they were covered by artillery or blown up by mines. Look at this footage taken by a Russian soldier during one of these attacks. We see a lot of Russian soldiers. One of them started filming the vehicles that were on their way to attack Avdiivka. At the same time, he's commenting on how powerful and strong they are. Let's find out what happened to them after a while. The equipment turned into a pile of metal, and the surviving infantry had to retreat to the nearest shelter where we can see some charred equipment and guns. This is one such reconnaissance. The column of occupants is moving towards the positions of the AFU. The first tank drives over a landmine. Look again at this detonation. Then, we see that some of them managed to break through a little further, but the same fate awaited them. The APC is spectacularly blown up by a kamikaze drone. But even so, the Russians tried to move forward, but were hit by more mines. Beginning to work artillery defense forces to prevent enemy equipment to the positions. Tanks of the invaders have advanced. The second column loses one APC. Immediately after that, another APC is hit by an anti-tank missile. The first column is still moving towards the AFU strongholds. The first few tanks are blown up by mines. The confused crew decides to land the infantry right on the spot. The AFU is engaging them in combat. At this time, a tank from the third group explodes on a mine. It won't be a surprise for you to see such stupidity. But in the same place, another APC is blown up. The damaged tank detonates. The attack fails. There were many attacks like this in the following days. Here, the attack ended as quickly as it began. A huge column headed towards the Ukrainian soldiers' positions. The group of armored vehicles is met by artillery fire, attack drones, and minefields. Take a look to find out what ultimately became of them. Such meaty assaults took place for 4 days with small intervals. During these days, the AFU had already run out of food, water, and ammunition. The soldiers didn't sleep, so they were ordered to leave their positions and retreat. The village of Stepov was taken. But look at the storming of Avdiivka in winter, about a month ago. Try to see the difference. All this time, Ukrainian artillery does not stop working. Drone operators start hunting for infantry. And those who managed to land were already awaited by Ukrainian infantry and anti-tank systems. Drones were one of the most effective weapons in the defense of Avdiivka. As vehicles and columns move predictably, it becomes much easier to hit them. Here, we see a tank rolled over on the road. They didn't have to wait long for the Ukrainian kamikaze drone. And here, the drone hits right in the turret. The impact was so strong that it flew several meters away from the tank. Have another look. Another vehicle failed to reach its position. And this is the result of another Russian attack in the southern direction. A lot of broken tanks, BMPs, hundreds of bodies. The beauty of the Russian world. Avdiivka, Bakhmut, as well as Lysychansk are quite profitable for defense. But, thanks to something else, the enemy manages to advance. The Russians determine breakthrough areas, concentrate forces, and resources. As a rule, this happens on the flanks of fortified positions of the AFU. The occupiers tried to hide in this house, but several kamikaze drones of the AFU were already waiting for them. Another unsuccessful assault. A T-72 tank and a BMP with infantry. One hit in the engine compartment, and the tank turns into a can of sardines with a gun. The Russians got a bit dreamy and left the tank unattended. Quick and attentive, Ukrainians launched several drones and destroyed this outdated meat pot. A Russian tank found itself in the wrong place at the wrong time. A dramatic and effective hit by a kamikaze drone puts the Russian tank out of action. The Gvozdika howitzer was firing on Ukrainian soldiers. The response was quick and harsh. 3 drones left the howitzer no chance of survival. Don't discount strike drones. They continue to serve. In this video, the drone hits 2 targets at once, a damaged tank and a recovery vehicle. But that's not all. American HIMARS are always effective and deadly. So far, the Russians have found no defense against them. A heavy flamethrower system, Soint-Sepek, worth $15 million, was lurking in this forest. Ukrainian intelligence spotted the target and passed its coordinates to the HIMARS. As always, the result was spectacular. In these frames, you can see the flamethrower system Soint-Sepek ablaze. In a moment, you'll witness a very powerful explosion. The fire heated the ammunition, leading to this scenario I just described. A BM-27 Uragan, a formidable and destructive weapon. 2 of these MLRS ended up in one place. I'm sure after this hit, both machines are out of commission. The second missile surely destroys the remains of the Russian junk. And this rocket artillery is no less dangerous. A HIMARS missile lands perfectly on its target. You can estimate the force of the explosion of the MLRS from this spot. Another video featuring HIMARS. First, Ukrainians target a truck and a howitzer. The next target for the HIMARS is the heavy mortar Tulip. A direct hit leads to the detonation of the mortar's ammunition. In these next clips, we see 2 trucks loaded with ammunition. The second missile accurately hits both targets, followed by a brief fire and then an explosion of some of the ammunition. The Russian field headquarters for coordinating troop actions. Notice how the Russians dispersed their vehicles to reduce the likelihood of all being hit by a single Ukrainian strike. The R-18 radar was conducting airspace reconnaissance. 2 HIMARS missiles puts an end to that activity. An OSA-SAM, an important element in the fight against missiles and drones, but not against HIMARS missiles. The target is hit. The Zaporizhzhia region. Special Operations Forces intelligence identified 2 self-propelled mortars, Nona-S. Coordinates have already been relayed to the HIMARS unit. A direct hit destroys the Russian weaponry. It loads the gun, and with the second shot, immobilizes the fleeing vehicle. Damn, these guys fight like the real elite. Klishchivka. At this point, the Russians have become more active and are trying to regain control of the settlement. A Russian armored strike group is moving across the fields towards the settlement. A Ukrainian drone is performing reconnaissance and adjusting artillery. Kaboom! The Russian guys are starting to have some serious problems on their hands.